Adesanya versus Kelvin Gastelum. Let me give you guys my take on the fight. I just rewatched it this morning. What an incredible performance by both men. Now, in the past, I've worked with Gastelum, and I can tell you he's a very special athlete. He's incredibly powerful, incredibly strong. And I had picked Adesanya. I thought Adesanya was going to be too tall, too long, too much range. And even if he got taken down by Gastelum, of course, on the ground, you don't have to worry too much about reach anymore. I thought that Adesanya's jiu-jitsu and ability to get back up would be enough. And round one was a big shocker for me, because in round one, I gave it to Kelvin Gastelum. And I thought that Kelvin would make it very competitive. I did think it would be extremely competitive. However, I did think that it would still be a fight that Adesanya would win by a secure margin. I had it neck and neck going into the fifth. So I had 2 rounds for Gastelum and I had 2 rounds for Adesanya. I think that's how most people saw it as well. And in the 5th round, Adesanya, in my opinion, scored a 10-8. He wasn't very far off from finishing the fight completely. Now, round 1, you have to give it to Gastelum because he stuns Adesanya really badly with a right hook. And before that, it was kind of tight. It was a close round. Nothing significant had happened, but it was definitely a Gastelum round in round 1. Gastelum just clipped him right on the chin, stumbled Adesanya really badly. I didn't give it a 10-8, but it was a secure 10-9, in my opinion, for Kelvin. Round 2 was a much more competitive round. I do believe I had given it to Adesanya just because, of course, Adesanya had dropped him. Actually, there's no doubt about it. But I didn't give him a 10-8. I could have been a 10-8. I know there's a new scoring system, but I just felt it was still a 10-9 round. He dropped Gastelum, but Gastelum had popped right back up like nothing had happened, and he kept keeping that pressure forward. And I thought that because of Gastelum's reaction, it didn't seem like it was such a bad knockdown. Sometimes you just get stumbled because your feet were not under you, and the shot didn't really hurt you that bad. I still think it was a legitimate knockdown, but really not the worst kind of knockdown you can get. It was kind of I still had a doubt whether it was a flash knockdown or not. So I gave it a 10-9 for Adesanya, but a secure 10-9. Round 3, we had that great back fist. We had that phenomenal, back elbow by Adesanya. Won that round easily, in my opinion. That was his round again. And then, of course, round 4, the incredible head kick by Gastelum. Gastelum scores a beautiful head kick, injures Adesanya really badly, doesn't knock him down, but has him wobbling, has him drunk on his legs, and he's going back and forth, and he looks like he's about to fall. And what does Gastelum do? He shoots and puts him up against the fence as time is running out. Instead of maybe finishing him with strikes, he elects to shoot. A lot of people were wondering about that decision. Didn't make any sense. In my opinion, look, it's a judgment call. Hindsight is 20/20. I think maybe Gastelum could have taken him down and just finished him off on the ground. It could have happened that way. But I do understand why a lot of people out there are saying that he should have just kept striking at Adesanya. But you have to understand, sometimes when a guy is stunned, he's still super dangerous. Adesanya is still super dangerous. He could still... I've seen it so many times. A fighter is stunned, and the stunned fighter ends up winning by KO. I've seen that many times. Okay, now it's not as likely as the fighter who's fresh and still strong on his feet. He has the advantage, but nonetheless, a hurt opponent is still very dangerous. So maybe that's why Gastelum shot in on him. I'm sure there's a lot of interviews with him explaining his decision on why he did that. Of course, it's always hindsight is 20/20, right? If he would have took him down and finished him with strikes or elbows from the top position, everybody would be saying how brilliant it was to shoot on him. So I really think it's one of those things. I didn't think it was such a bad decision watching it live because the takedown was such a big possibility. And Kelvin on top of Adesanya, I think, would lead to a possible finish. It could very well lead to a possible finish, especially because Adesanya was hurt. So you can get him kind of in a half guard, top position, just kind of rain down some elbows. And I've worked with Kelvin in the past, and I can tell you he's a very powerful athlete. And on top of you, he's extremely dangerous, extremely dangerous. He wouldn't need a lot of fancy jiu-jitsu to finish somebody off. He doesn't need any subs. Just his power from the top position, his ground and pound power, could have been enough to finish Adesanya, in my opinion. Round number 5 was a clear Adesanya round. Clear. And if there was any more time, I think Adesanya would have finished the fight. And you know what? I think it wouldn't have been a bad stoppage if the referee had stepped in and ended the fight before the bell. Now, I remember Joe Rogan calling for the fight to be end. He was screaming out, stop the fight, stop the fight. I felt very much the same way. Adesanya had landed numerous right hands in that fight. Numerous right hands before the final flurry. And in that final flurry, when he knocked Kelvin down, he had landed a very, very significant elbow. And in my opinion, Gastelum was just... it was just a matter of time before he gets completely finished by Adesanya. But lo and behold, he does get back to an underhook. He does get back to his knees. But I still felt it was going to be a 10-8 round for sure for Adesanya. If that's not a 10-8 round, what is a 10-8 round? And I did feel that fight was going to be ended if there was any more time. Maybe 20, 30 more seconds, it was going to be a finish for Adesanya. So with that said, I'd like to take your questions and comments on that fight. Just the Adesanya fight for now. And let's see where we're at. Israel is just so much taller and knows how to use his height. And he showed a good chin too. That's from Michael Vargas. Yes, but you know what? Kelvin showed an equal amount of competence in closing the distance. He was brilliant in closing the distance. Yes, there was, I think it was like a 7-inch height advantage or difference between the two. And I, like you, I thought, Michael, I also thought that it was going to bother Gastelum a lot more. However, Gastelum seemed to close the distance really, really well. It didn't seem like it was a major issue for Gastelum. Not at least till the 5th round. In the 5th round, I did feel that Adesanya, he landed in the 5th round, he landed that push kick to the face. And that's a tall man's move. That's a tall man versus a short man. And that works really well against somebody with really long legs, against a shorter fighter who really wants to be punch aggressive. And till the 5th round, it seemed like the reach advantage and height advantage wasn't a major issue. In the 5th round, though, I did feel it started to become a major issue. So with that, I would agree. Can Israel beat Yoel? That's from Captain J. That's a really good question. I feel that Yoel is too durable, too explosive. He's what Kelvin does, but at a higher intensity. He's what Kelvin does at a higher intensity. His punching output is more powerful. His takedowns are more powerful. His ability to absorb damage, I think, is also more powerful. And his striking is more diverse. I would say Yoel Romero's striking is more diverse. Again, it's always hard to say because every two fighters are going to have a different chemistry when they get in there. However, I would say that Yoel is a bigger, stronger, more explosive version of Kelvin. I would like to see Kelvin compete at 185 and 170. Don't forget, Kelvin is a long-time welterweight. He's competed and had a lot of success at welterweight. I do believe he can be a world champion at welterweight, definitely, especially after his last performance. However, I do feel that the guys at middleweight are a little bit... they're bigger than him. They're outsizing him. Now, with that said, we got to remember, if we look at what Whitaker did, Whitaker seems to be, or a lot of us thought we weren't sure if he'd be too small of a middleweight, and he proved everybody wrong. He's a phenomenal middleweight champion. And having worked with Whitaker in the past, I do think that the weight cuts were a major issue for him because he was too big for welterweight and possibly too small. At that time, we were not sure if he's big enough to be a middleweight. And of course, he was young. He was still growing. He filled out more. He's not growing in height, but he was still growing and filling out, getting thicker, larger. As you get past your mid-20s, you start adding some weight. You start getting your man strength. You start peaking in your strength. It was a good move for Whitaker, obviously. However, I think Gastelum may still explore 170 because I did feel that. And I do feel that some of these middleweights may be too big for him, like his fight with Chris Weidman. I just felt that Chris Weidman was, they're both very competent wrestlers, both very competent strikers. But when you have that size advantage at that level of competition, can be a problem. So I would love to see him explore 170 and 185. Who knows? Who knows? I never count Kelvin Gastelum out. If I remember correctly, he was the last pick on the Ultimate Fighter. He did the Ultimate Fighter show. And if I remember correctly, he was the last pick, and he ended up winning the show. And that was the time where Uriah Hall was highly touted. A lot of people thought that Uriah Hall would win that show easily. And rightfully so. He's a great fighter. And I believe, they went to the final together. Uriah Hall had some very significant wins on that show. Very, very intimidating fighter. Very big prospect. Great striker. Until today, he's still in UFC, still winning, putting together great wins against young prospects. Very impressive win, his last time out. However, I do think that Kelvin can still make 170. Now, for those who don't remember, he's had trouble making 170. He's missed weight back to back, and he's had some weight issues in the past, no doubt. I'm not remembering all the details on his weight issues, but I do remember him missing weight. Maybe he gets organized and makes 170 again and becomes a world champion, or maybe he continues his trek in the middleweight division. Now, don't forget, he's still young. He's 27, and when you're 27, you could still gain weight. Especially once you start rounding towards 30 years old, you can get thicker, you can get larger. If you're not careful with the way you eat, if you're not careful with your lifestyle, you can put on a lot of weight. Most definitely, for those of you who are in your late 20s, you definitely know, if you don't eat well and you don't take care of your health, and it can happen to an athlete. It does happen to athletes, because athletes between fights will binge. They will get very recreational. They will get very, very recreational, and when they do, they'll gain weight like everybody else. Kelvin missed weight by 10 pounds at a time. I do remember him missing. That's from Jay. I do remember him missing by a large margin. But was that because he was disorganized, or was it just because his body doesn't fit in the welterweight division? I don't know. I haven't spoken to him about it. I haven't talked to him in a very long time. So that's for him to decide.